Okay, welcome to Module 6. This is the module where we really start to use the tools available to us, and we're going to build a site. We're going to build a fairly basic site to start with, but you'll learn how to use a lot of the tools within Avada in the process of building this site. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have a look at the dashboard, and we notice that we've got an update indicator. So it said that it's telling us that there is something to update. So let's just see what that is. It turns out to be the theme itself. So Avada 5.7.2 has been released. So we're going to just quickly update the theme before we start work. You don't have to do this. It'll still work with 5.7.1 obviously, but I just prefer to keep everything up to date as I go along. Now, it occurred to me that I hadn't actually really demonstrated properly how to download a theme from ThemeForest. So let me just quickly show you how to download a new version of the theme. Because I've already got an account, I'm logged in. I'm going to go to my downloads, and I'm going to see all of the themes that I bought. So Avada appears quite a few times. So here's Avada. This will be the latest release now. I'm going to choose to download all files and documentation. I can actually just download the installable WordPress files if I like, but I kind of just by habit I just click all files and documentation for some reason. So now I'm going to look at my downloads folder, and we can see that it's downloading, and here's the file that downloaded. If I double click on that, what it does is it opens and it installs this folder instead. It expands to this folder. Now you'll notice that we've got the license in here, some extras which I don't really use any of this. The key thing that we need is the Avada theme. Now if you download a different theme, the folder structure may be different, but fundamentally within that folder structure there will be the theme somewhere. So if I double click on Avada theme, we'll see that we've got Avada child theme zip and Avada zip. Now it's the zip file that I could upload directly to my appearance and themes, but if you remember from an earlier module, what that does is it will put the theme into a folder called Avada. So I just expand that, and if I open that now, what it does is it expands and it gives me the theme itself, all the theme files expanded. So it's those files that I then subsequently FTP across to the server. Now obviously I've already prepared this somewhat, so I've already got those files here, Avada 5.72. So I'm just going to go to my public HTML folder, WP content, themes, and then I'm going to expand Your Perfect Name because that's the folder name that I gave it rather than Avada. And I'm just going to select all from the left hand side and click transfer. Then it's going to ask me if I want to overwrite this. I just say yes, overwrite everything. So what that's now doing is updating the theme itself. All of the theme files will be overwritten with the new versions, some of which will not change, some of which will have changed. So it's best just to copy everything across and everything gets overwritten, and then obviously hopefully the update indicator will then disappear. Okay, so while that's doing that, I'm just going to show you quickly the site that I'm going to build. Just a sort of screenshot of it. This is just something I found on the internet. It's got a nice header, it's got the navigation, it's got some elements in there that are going to allow me to show you how to use the tools within Avada and within what's called the Fusion Builder, which allows us to create these kind of page layouts. It's not going to look exactly like this, obviously. I'm going to use slightly different images, but more or less the layout is what we're going to end up with. Something along these lines. So that's what we're going to be shooting for. So I'll just leave that open, I think, so we can see it, and you can see how things are going as we're working through it. Let's just check the progress of the theme update. Okay, it's got a little way to go. Now I've obviously also prepared all of these images in advance, just to save time really. The image preparation is a little bit outside of the scope of this course. There's plenty of information on the internet about how to prepare images if you want to learn, and you will need to learn how to prepare images, incidentally. I tend to use Adobe Photoshop for most of my image preparation, and I find images on places like iStock Photo or Shutterstock where you can buy really good quality images to use on your websites. I advise you not to download them from Google and use them on sites, because obviously there are copyright issues relating to that. But generally speaking, an image needs to be optimized to be used on a website. If you have a nice big image fresh out of a camera, it'll probably be somewhere between 5 and 10, maybe even 15 megabytes, maybe even bigger, coming out of the high resolution cameras. That's way too big to use on a website. It doesn't need to be that big, because the display cannot actually show all of that detail anyway. So what we do is we optimize the images. I would suggest that you save most of your images to something like 2048 pixels wide, and save them as compressed JPEGs. That means that you should end up with files. Let's go into my images that I've already prepared. Files of around 250 to 500K. This one's 594, so that's one of the bigger ones. Now this one here, which is 1.2 megabytes, is actually a transparent PNG file, so it can't be compressed quite so much as the JPEG, and so I may not use that on the website build. You're better off using JPEGs. There are occasions, particularly like with the logo, where we will have to use a transparent PNG so we can sit it on top of an image, but obviously that's a much smaller file, the logo that I've created, than the mountain background image, which is that one there. So you have to have a look at the images that you're preparing and make sure that you can get the file size down to something acceptable. Otherwise your website will end up being really slow. So just go onto the internet and do a bit of research about how to prepare images properly for the web, and you'll find lots of information. Okay, so that's now copied across. I'm just going to refresh this page, and Avada should now, or at least the update indicators should disappear. Okay, so now it's saying, as a result of doing that update, it's now saying that there are also updates to both Fusion Builder and Fusion Core, which, if you remember, are part of Avada. So I would expect that to be the case. So I'm just going to select all and click Update Plugins. And that'll then go away for a second and update the plugins as well. Now it may be that we then subsequently get another indicator to say that there's a patch that's required to be updated as well. Let's just see how that goes. Okay, so that's updated, and it doesn't look as though we've got anything else to update. Okay, so now let's go to our front end. I'm just going to refresh the front end. Okay, so as I said, this is Avada out of the box. This is what it looks like out of the box. I obviously would want to change the logo. I tend not to use what's called the page title, which is that section there. And this is currently set up to display a blog post as the home page. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new page. I'm not going to put anything on it for the time being, but I'm just going to call it home, and I'm going to publish it. So it's as simple as that. I've just called a page home, and I've published it as a page. Then I'm going to go to settings and reading, and I'm going to change your home page displays to a static page and select home. So that has now become the home page, the first page of my website. So it's the one that the user would land on as soon as they hit your domain name. So if I now just refresh this page, we'll see that the blog post goes away and it's replaced with home. So that's just a blank page and a blank home page set as the first page that the user would see when they hit your website. Okay, so when I installed Avada, the theme options are set up as Avada have programmed them to be. So various aspects of the customization options are already set. So we've got the colors are set. There's a color set. The header is set to a certain setting. The logo is set to Avada. All of these things are just the default setup, which more or less, well, yeah, 100% of the time, you're going to want to change some of these elements, particularly the logo, probably the colors, some of the spacing options, all sorts of things you're going to want to change. Now, obviously, I've been doing this for a while, so I have my own preferred setup. And in Avada, there's a very, very quick way to import your default setup. So you can overwrite the Avada setups very, very quickly. And the way you do that is you go to Avada Theme Options and Import Export and click on Import Contents from a File. Now what you have to do now is paste a load of code in here in order to import those settings, and the code I've saved as part of my notes basically. So let's just try Avada New Theme Options. Now I'll make these part of the resources for you, so if you want to, you can have a go at doing this. So there we are. I've pasted that code in there, and it's just a lot of completely you cannot understand what all of that does, but basically it's just changing a lot of the settings in the theme options. So I'm just going to click import, and that'll then go away, and just after a few seconds it should report that it's done. Okay, settings imported. So now if I go back to the front end and I refresh, we'll see that it looks completely different. Okay, so the logo's gone, the page title is gone, the colors have changed, the footer is a different color, it's in this light grey color, although actually that's not the footer, but we'll come on to that later. I've got some different text in the copyright section, so I've got a cite by indicator. Now all of these things you can, once you've settled on your own theme options, perhaps you go through and you develop a site and you're really happy with all the theme options that you've got and you want to save them, you can then actually use that same tool, import export, but in this instance you would then export the options. So you would copy the data, and there it all is. If you then just copy that to your clipboard, save it to your notepad wherever you, or Evernote or whatever you use to save notes, and then you can use that code to import into your next site, and you will have all of the setup options that you're familiar with, that you're happy with. Okay, just to say, once you do that a few times, it will become really, really easy. It looks quite complicated, but in fact it's really, really easy. So don't worry too much about that at this stage. Okay, so let's go in and start building this page. So this is the site that we're going to try and build. Let me just get rid of some of these things so it doesn't complicate the view. Okay, so this site is made up, we've got a logo, some navigation, we've got a big header image, then we've got another section with some text, then some left and right images, right images left, text right, etc., etc. So let's go through and recreate this on our home page. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to put that header image in place, and I'm going to start to use some of the tools within Avada. So by default this is WordPress. So if you type into WordPress, that's what you get. You just type in some text. Now we don't have any tools inherent within WordPress to create these kind of sections on a page and this layout, this left and right column based layout. However, Fusion Builder, which is part of Avada, gives us those tools. So if I now just click on this big blue button, Edit with Fusion Builder, we'll see that everything changes. We've now got something that allows us to create what appears to be called a container. So let's click on that. And now we've got an option that appears to give us options to create columns. So I can have one column, the full width of the page. I can have half and half column. I can have third columns, and so on. There's pretty much infinite options there, from one column through to 6 columns, and a lot of divisions in between. So for instance, yes, a 4/5 and a 1/5. So you can see that by using these tools we can lay the page out in the way that we want to in order to achieve this page layout. So the first one we're going to do is obviously the header, and that appears to be just one big image on the top. So let's just put one column in there. Now in order to get this text on the top of this image, I cannot put the image in as part of the content, I have to make it a background image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it a background of the container. Now importantly, each section on the page is made up of a container which then contains the columns. Now I can have one column, or I can have 2 columns, 3 columns, 4 columns, 5 columns, 6 columns, but those columns are all contained in one container. And if I then want to make another container, I can do so, and I can split the columns in a different way. So first of all, let's put the header image in the background of the container. So what I did there, I just clicked on that little icon there which appears to look like a pen. These are really the main tools you're going to need, incidentally, you're going to get familiar with. You're going to click on this pen to edit, or this other icon here, which is kind of a plus sign on top of a piece of paper with lines on it, which allows you to clone the container. And we'll come on to cloning the container later on. But fundamentally what you're going to be using most of the time is this one with edit on. Now you'll notice that there's one of these on the container. There's also one on the row, which is this single row here. And once we put an element into the row, we'll also get another set of these same icons. They do the same thing in terms of allowing you to edit whatever element you're clicking on. So let's edit the container and have a look at what options we've got here. So we've got 3 tabs on this particular container here. So let's have a look what they do. We've got options to set the height, options to set equal column heights. We've got a background tab, and we've got a design tab. Now we're going to go on to look at what all of these things do later on, but first of all what I'm going to do is I'm just going to very quickly set the background image. So I'm going to click on the background tab. I'm then going to go to background image and upload an image. Now I'm going to search my hard disk for the images that we looked at earlier, and I'm going to find that image that I want to use as the background header. So I think it's this one, Alaska header, which is the one I've prepared. So I just double clicked on that, and there it is, it's uploaded. Now you'll notice that it uploads and says the size is medium 300 by 147. Depending on what your image size is will determine what actually appears here, but I want to use it as full size. So I'm going to click the drop down and just select full size. So it uploads this in the biggest size that it can. And this image happens to be 1920 pixels by 938. So I'm going to insert that into the page, and I'm going to save it. You see that we don't really see anything because it's set to the background of the container at the moment. Now I'm just going to update that, and we'll go and have a look how that looks on the front end. I'm going to refresh the page, and the chances are that we won't really see anything. We might see a thin, okay, so we see a thin line. Now that's because the container has no height at the moment. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the element within the row. Remember, we've got the container and we've got a row within it, and it happens to be a full width row at the moment. So I'm just going to click the element, and I'm going to put in the words "Welcome to Alaska." Now these are all the tools that are available to me to insert into a row. We'll use these as we go through the course, but obviously you can have a look to see what options are available to you and have a play around with them whenever you like. But the one that we're going to use at the moment is called text block. So let's choose the text block, and we're going to write "Welcome to Alaska." And I'm going to now highlight that and set it as an H1 tag because I want it to be a nice big heading, and I'm going to set it to be centered. Save. Now if we update that, although we're going to see that text on the image, it's still not ideal because it still doesn't really have any height. Okay, so there's the word "Welcome to Alaska," and there's the image. It's got a bit bigger because we've put in a nice big "Welcome to Alaska" bit of text. Okay, so now let's go back and edit it a little bit further. I'm also going to put in underneath there, I'm going to put in official state of Alaska vacation and travel information website, and I'm going to center that as well, and I'm going to make that perhaps H3. Okay, let's update that, and then we can have a look. Then we can have another look. Sorry if you can hear sirens in the background. Hopefully it's just passing by. Okay, so there we are. So you see that it's building. The image is getting a little bit bigger, although it's still not ideal. We would want that to be much higher. So in order to put that height in, I'm going to put some spacing into the element. So I'm going to add something called a separator. And I'm going to change the style to no style. Then I'm going to hit the design tab, and I'm going to say the margin 200. Okay, so that will give me 200 pixels of space underneath that text. Now what I'm going to do is, you'll notice that on these elements we've also got the little pen symbol and also the clone symbol. Don't worry about these other two for now, but don't click them. If you do click them, it doesn't matter, but we'll cover those in a bit more detail later on. But it's mainly these two we're going to be using in this part of the course. So this is where I would edit that element, and this is where I can clone it. Now if I clone it, basically what happens, it just duplicates it. There becomes another one. So now we've got two separators underneath the text, but ideally what I want to do is put one separator on top of the text and have another one underneath. So what I can do is I can just click on the element away from these icons, just click on the element and literally lift it up and drag it and put it on top of the text. So now I can update it, and now if I refresh, we see now that the text is nicely in the center, and there's a bit of spacing top and bottom. So this is now beginning to build nicely. One thing you will notice, of course, is that it's not the full width of the screen. Now it may be that you want it to be the full width of the screen, and if you do want to do that, then that's fine, but your images doing it using this method will need to be quite big, quite wide, in order to show across the full width of the screen. If somebody is viewing your website on a very, very big monitor with a high resolution, then it may be that the image itself gets cut off left and right. There is a different way of doing this using something called a Fusion slider, which will then automatically stretch the image regardless of the viewport size. We're going to cover that in the more advanced module later on, but for now let's just continue with this method, because I can show you how to stretch this image for the majority of users anyway. So let's do that now. We'll go back to editing the page. Now you'll notice that over on the right hand side we see something called template, and this is currently set to the default template. Now the default template will basically put everything in what's called the grid. So this is the grid, it's a fixed width, and nothing else outside of that grid will show. Now you'll notice that at the bottom here, where we've got the footer is currently set to be 100% width. So if I now make my image, my viewport, my browser much wider, you'll see that the footer stretched, but the image itself stayed in the grid, what's called in the grid, so it stayed where it was. Now a lot of the time you want that because you want to be able to control where things are placed on the page. In the footer it's not so much the case, but certainly parts of the page you're going to want to control the placement of either the text or the image. Now in the header, particularly when you're using a background image like this, the chances are that you will want it to stretch across the full width of the page, but you'll want the text to stay in the grid, and that's perfectly possible. Now let's go and set this on the container. So we're going to have a look at the container first of all. So just click on edit the container. Now we've got couple of options. One is 100% height. One is the background position center. So here we can change the position of the background image. I'm just looking for something here that I'm not seeing. I know why I'm not seeing it now. Okay, going back to the template where we've got default template set, let's just click that as that drop down, and instead of default template, let's select 100% width and just update that. Okay, so now if I go into the container, the options would be slightly different. I've now got an option to set the interior content width. You see, I can then set the interior content width to 100% width or the site width, which is in the grid. Now, what we want is the background to be full width and the interior content, where the text is, to remain in the grid. So let's leave that as it is, but that's where you would change it if you did want the interior width to be full width as well, or the text to be full width. So now let's just refresh that and see what effect that's had. There we go. So now we've got that full width. Okay, so what we would like to see now, I think, is for this text not to be black. We would like it to be white. Now we've got two options here. We can actually go into the element and select all of the text, and if we click this toolbar toggle here, I could actually set the text to be white here. Now that's one way of doing it. The other option is to set the H1 tag and the H3 tag, which is what I've used for this text. Remember H1 and H3. I can set that to always be white. And then if I then place H1 and H3 anywhere else within the site, it will always be white. Now bear in mind that that can be a problem because sometimes you don't want it to be white. But let's just have a quick look now at how we would do that. So I've just opened another tab, and I'm just going to go to the Avada theme options, and I'm going to go to typography, and within typography we can set the body typography to be whatever we like, and the headers typography. So the headers typography is currently set to font color almost black by the look of it. So let's set that to white. And the H3 as well, I would like to set to white. Now the other thing I'm going to do here while I'm here is I'm going to set the H1 tag to be a font similar to what we're looking at here. It's not going to be exactly the same, but I think Oswald is one that I use reasonably frequently, and it's more or less that. So I've now changed the font family, the font name, and the font color of the H1 tag, and I've changed just the font color of the H3 tag. So let's save those changes. Now we can go back to the front end, press refresh, and we should now see that that's become white. Now depending on your background image will determine whether the white text sits nicely on it or whether it needs to be black or a different color. Now the other thing that we can do is we can put a slight overlay over the top of the background image so the text sits better on top of it, but that would be covered later on in the more advanced part of the course. One final thing we'll do in the header here, you'll notice that the header goes all the way to the top. So in order to do that, what I need to do is I need to set the margins on the page, and that is set a little bit further down in the Fusion page options. If we click on page, you'll see that I've got a page content padding. Now by default, and this is set as part of the theme options that I imported just a little while ago, they are set to be 80 and 40, so that's top and bottom. What I want on this particular site is for the top to have no margin at all. Now if I go back and refresh this now, it will probably not have changed. Let's just wait for that to refresh. It's still saving it just at the moment. Okay, still saving it. Okay, finally. Okay, so it has changed, actually. It has gone to the top. Now, I wasn't expecting it to do that because sometimes if your navigation area, which would be the top there, it can interfere with it. I'm just going to quickly check to see. Yes, it may just be because I haven't got navigation in place. So let's just put that in place. So in order to create some navigation, you need to create a menu. So that is done in Appearance and Menus. So let's just wait for that to load. My internet appears to be on a go slow. It happens from time to time. Okay, so we have no menu set at the moment, which is what I would expect. I'm going to just call this main header menu. You can call it whatever you like. So there's the menu created, but we have no menu structure at the moment, so there's nothing in it. Let's just, over on the left-hand side, we can click Home and Add to Menu. Now I'm going to set this menu to be the main navigation menu, the mobile menu, and what's called the sticky header navigation, which we'll cover later. I'm also going to click Automatically Add New Top Level Pages to this menu. Now what that will do is, if I create any more pages now, any new pages, they will just automatically get added to the menu without me having to worry about it. Now while I'm building a site, I generally have that ticked. As soon as the site goes live, I untick that, just in case I then subsequently create a new page just for test purposes. I then don't want it really to be added to the menu in a live environment. So I just untick that. You can always delete the menu items, you can move them around and make all sorts of changes to them anyway, so it's not a big deal if you forget to untick that, but that's where you would go if you wanted to untick it. So let's just refresh that now and see if that's made any difference. Okay, so there we go. That's what I was expecting to see. So even though I've set the page margin to 0, I'm still seeing that the menu in the top is sitting on top of the image, when in fact I want it to just sort of bleed behind it, as it were. But before I actually make that change, the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to load the logo first of all. So again, I go to the Avada Theme Options. I've already prepared the logo, obviously, and this happens to be a transparent background logo, so it's a PNG file, because I want it to sit on top of the image. Okay, so I'm in Avada Theme Options. I'm going to go to Logo, and you see that there's no logo at all set at the moment. As soon as I click Upload, I then get the option to select files, and I'm going to find two logos, Alaska Logo and Alaska Logo Retina. Now the reason there's two is because one is twice the size of the other, and that's to allow for the new high quality Retina screens that are coming out now, whereby the resolution of those screens is that much greater, much bigger, and therefore the quality of the logo needs to be that much greater to reflect that. So with Avada we get the option of uploading two versions of the logo, two different sizes of the logo, in order to cater for that. So you'll notice that I've uploaded both of those at once. That means that they are now in my media library and I can access them more easily. So I just uploaded them both at once. So first of all, we're going to upload, we're going to insert this logo, which is the 175 one, which is the standard resolution. So I just select that. Now it gives me the option to upload the Retina version. So then I select that from my media library. I don't need to upload the files again because I've uploaded them both at once, and now they're in my media library. So you'll see that this one is twice as big, 350 by 100 instead of 175 by 50. So I select that. Then I can upload the logos again. Well, I don't need to upload them again, they're already in the media library, but I'm just setting the same logos to work with the sticky header logo and also to work as the mobile logo. Now, what size your logos end up being will be determined by the type of logo, the shape of the logo, but generally speaking, if it's a landscape orientation logo, then you're looking at somewhere between 350 and 560 pixels wide in the Retina version, and then you can half that for the standard resolution version. Okay, so click Save the Changes. Now if we go back to the front end and just refresh that, the chances are we're not going to see it. You see that it's uploaded something because it's indicating, but it's gone. It's not visible because it's white, so it's I want it to sit on this image eventually, but you can't see it because the header is currently set to white. So let's go and fix that. The other thing I'm going to fix is the height of this header, because when you upload a logo, once you've loaded a logo incidentally, the menu height may change. So you go to Avada menu, and this is where you set your menu height, and it's determined by the size of the logo. So this number will change according to the size of your logo. So I'm going to set that to its recommended 112 pixels. And then if I go back and refresh, you'll see that that header becomes just a little bit more narrow. Okay, but it's still white, so how are we going to fix that? So let's go in and edit the page.